All right, gentlemen, listen up. Today we're going to talk about the silent sexual revolution. And if you want to be better men, this is a battle that you need to win, or else you're going to lose the war when it comes to attracting women. My guest is Dr. Stephen Edwards, who's a world expert on exactly this subject. As a matter of fact, he's the one who's coined it and perhaps noticed it first, but you're going to get a major advantage because you were here and you heard it. Well, at least second, right? My name is Scott McKay, and this is the Mountaintop Podcast where better men get better women. And I want to introduce you indeed to my first time guest, none other than Dr. Stephen Edwards from Sarasota, Florida. He is a PhD in spiritual counseling and an international speaker, and he's the author of a book with the auspicious title, The Venus Flytrap: Sex, Lies, and Repercussions. Stephen, welcome to the show, man.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Scott. It's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, and you're originally from Britain.
I'm originally from Britain, yes.
Yes, fantastic. And we were both talking about the English Premier League and the opposite trajectories our respective teams are going.
Yeah.
Because you're a Manchester City guy and I'm a Wolverhampton Wanderers guy. And that's probably enough about me for this section of the podcast. We should probably just get to what you're best at talking about, which is the silent sexual revolution. Now, you've got one heck of an image for a book there with a Venus flytrap. I mean, if you make the extension to that, representing a woman's vagina, that's a heck of a snapper there. So what is the connection between Venus flytrap and the silent sexual revolution?
Yeah. Well, when I first met Tamaz, who's the lady in the book, I told her I was going to buy some flowers. And I said, what are your favorite flowers? And she said, bird of paradise. So I made a joke. I said, well, mine too, but it's a bit expensive. What's your second favorite? And she immediately came back with Venus flytrap. So she named herself. And in that moment, I got that ominous feeling. And I realized that she was the Venus flytrap and I was going to be the flower.
Hey, she warned you ahead of time.
She warned me ahead of time. I had no excuses. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
And famously, she turned out to be a bit of an alcoholic and probably lots of red flags other than that.
Yeah, she was an alcoholic. She was a drug addict and she was a sex addict. So
it's nice. That 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, no, that's bad. Not bad, right? So yeah. And so
some would argue 1 out of 3.
Yeah. Rather than, you talked about the fact that I was a spiritual counselor. I worked in personal development. That all went out the window. She became the teacher and she pulled me into the Venus flytrap. So I entered her world, which makes it even more hilarious, right? I should have, and I did know better, but the force of nature, the magnetic pull was so strong that I forgot everything. It all went out the window.
Yeah, that's called being clouded by beauty vision. I'm guessing she was pretty hot.
She was pretty hot, yes.
That's what happens is we as guys, we see a woman who is more attractive than perhaps the ones we've been out with in the past. And we go, oh man, I've hit the jackpot here. And we sort of get this cognitive dissonance about all the other things she's bringing to the table, which maybe aren't so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And little by slow, what I found is I was losing myself. I lost myself, right? I wasn't doing the things that I normally do to take care of myself, the things that I was interested in. She became my magnificent obsession, or as I call her, my heroine.
Without the E at the end.
Yes. Good point. Yes, exactly.
The opiate, not the virtuous rescuer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So now we know where the Venus flytrap reference comes from.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting indeed that you're a PhD in spiritual counseling in general. That sounds a lot like a D-Min to me, like a doctor of ministry, but spiritual counseling would be different than being in the ministry, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that. There is a reason behind it. I told you I was in the personal development side of things, and I used to do my own events. I originally was working for Tony Robbins, then I ended up doing my own events. And so I got asked to do counseling, but you need licensure to do that. Otherwise you can get in trouble. And I wasn't going to spend 7 to 9 years learning how to be a psychologist. So I learned that if you study to be a spiritual counselor, which you can do in 3 to 4 years, you get licensure to be able to give counseling. And that's why I did it. And that's how it helped me. Yeah.
So you worked for Tony Robbins for a while there. Tony Robbins is an interesting cat. He's got a deal now where he's doing seminars with this guy named Dean Graziosi, who's
Yeah.
real estate magnate and very successful unto himself. But the thing is, when you see the two of them on video, they look like Yogi Bear and Boo Boo Bear.
I know. Dean is short and Tony is so huge. Yeah.
And I've noticed that, and this kind of follows Tony's reputation. He sort of alphas other dudes and is very dominant when he's doing his events and when he's coaching people live and especially on camera. And women seem to take to that. I feel like they love his strength. And I've noticed that's usually kind of beta guys who gravitate towards Tony Robbins, because the more alpha guys are like, well, you're not going to treat me like that, pal.
That's right.
And I was noticing this, this is going back a couple months now, but I was noticing that Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins were doing this deal about AI, and they were on camera together. Dean is doing none of the talking. He's just looking adoringly at Tony Robbins. And finally, Tony just pushes him out of the way so he has more room for his hands. And Dean just goes like this. And I was like, wow, that's really just not solid marketing. Because I don't think any guy who is successful should put himself in a position to be alpha. But I guess when Tony Robbins is such a global force of everything having to do with personal development, you put up with it. You ride the coattails. But did you ever see any of that with Tony? Or
oh yeah, absolutely. He's a very difficult person to share the stage with. He's so dominant. He just takes over, right? This is how he is, right? So it was kind of a little surprising that he partnered up with Dean. But Dean does a lot of things that, Tony's too busy to do now. But they are doing this program together. And the other programs they've done together have worked out very well. So I'm sure.
Oh, no, the quality of the work is indisputable. Yeah. But the dynamic between the two of them, I think it kind of falls into what we're talking about here, because, you were working for Tony Robbins and you found yourself in a trap, a Venus flytrap, with a woman who was kind of getting you to do what she wants to do, doing her bidding, so that, you would be strung along as a guy who was hopelessly attracted to her.
Yeah.
And somehow you've sprung yourself from the Venus flytrap, and now you're talking about this silent sexual revolution. And I'm sure your work with Tony has influenced who you are now and what you're talking about. So tie all that in together, because I think that's fascinating. And I think it'll be part of how this podcast can really help these guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. So, the dynamic of the book, as you said, was the Venus flytrap constantly trying to pull me in, me getting right in the jaws and then finding a way to get out. So it was hilarious. It was very fun. So
kind of like Michael Corleone in The Godfather. I keep trying to get out, and they keep dragging me back in.
Me back in. Just when I thought I was free. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some good snapper right there when it can keep.
Man, I was so close so many times. Yeah. She almost took my home, my cars, and everything. Right, not by me giving them to her, but actually by the law enforcement. I know, it's a story for another time.
That's a story for another podcast.
Yeah. So the silent sexual.
These guys have heard that story enough themselves. They
probably, they could probably tell me their own. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure. So the silent sexual revolution. Okay, so. I mean, you're part of it, right? I mean, what you're doing, if you weren't doing what you're doing, I mean, we'd still be Neanderthals. I was going to
say, that sounded ominous there for a second.
No. I mean,
what did I do now? It's always my fault. Yeah.
Well, probably is.
I grew up the oldest of three siblings, so it is always my fault. It still is always my fault. Yeah. Plus, I'm married, so
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, what's driving it is the fact that information is so much more available. We were talking before we started about. But we said it twice, if you'd have been around 20 years ago, my life would have been a lot different, right? With the information that you're sharing. And what's beautiful about that, though, is that men are more open to hearing it and taking it on,
Well, so we're more inundated with it.
Pardon?
We're more inundated with it.
Yeah, it's more accessible. Yeah, exactly. So that's part of what's driving it. Social media, television, movies are all driving this silent sexual revolution. The challenge is...
it's ironic already that you're talking about something that's so loud juxtaposed with the word silent.
Yeah. Well, you're watching a movie in silent, you're reading social media, but the silence comes from a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. And men are being disenfranchised because you can't say a lot of things that you'd like to say because you can be construed as being, again, what is it?
Well, you can be canceled
You'd
for
be
it.
canceled.
Well, masculinity in general is there's an attempt, and there has been an attempt for several decades now to redefine it into oblivion.
Toxic masculinity is what I was looking for, right?
Right, of course. So toxic masculinity actually is a term you don't hear much anymore.
Right.
It
right.
kind of like the word woke, it sort of became a self-own when people were starting to talk about themselves in first person as possessing these qualities or espousing an argument against those qualities, I guess is the better way to put it.
Yeah.
But people have stopped talking about it.
Exactly.
Because kind of like reinventing the word woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Supreme Court, what is a woman? And she refuses to answer.
Yeah.
Well, that's because she was afraid of her answer and how it might offend somebody.
Yeah.
And, 30, 40 years ago, this was the stuff of stand-up comedy that we would get to a point someday in our culture where people were afraid to talk about what a woman is.
Yeah.
So I would argue, and I've said this on the show, that it all started with God.
Mm-hmm.
God, is not the Judeo-Christian God or the Muslim God. God is whatever you want God to be.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of took hold a little bit, right? Culminating with the Rosemary's Baby mantra, God is dead, and Time magazine. And, do we even care about God anymore? Did God ever really exist at all? So what happened was we experienced a time in our culture that I would argue that was still very dominant within our culture till very, very recently. I think there's a bit of an reawakening of people spiritually.
Yep.
The people who are from more of a conservative view of Christianity would call it a revival, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some would say it's even caused by Charlie Kirk's assassination. And it comes from young people.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while there, we were very deeply rooted in secular humanism. And to some degree, I think we still are.
Yeah.
So what happened then was people tried that with masculinity. Okay, we're going to reimagine masculinity. A man can be whoever you think a man is. And the next thing you know, well, then masculinity is just a social construct. And if it was ever anything socially significant at all it was doing was hurting women and the patriarchy. And so it's time for women to take back their power. And the next thing you know, men are being told to do better, sit down, shut up, stay in your lane, but they're not given anything to replace it with. Meanwhile, what are women doing? The feminist movement is bogarting the virtuous masculine traits for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where we ended up as a culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there has been a backlash now, hasn't there?
Huge.
Yes. Go ahead.
We're going to have to go through that. It's like paradigms, and it is a new paradigm, a new sexual paradigm, go through three distinct phases. First, they are vehemently opposed. Second, they are ridiculed. And then finally, they're accepted as being, well, everybody knows that. It's obvious, right? So we've had the vehement opposition, to masculinity, to men, which was born out of the fact that women were suppressed for a long period of time. And in some ways, we know they still are. But there's more suppression now on the male side than probably the female side. Women are being held up more. People want them to be successful. You and I want women to be successful. You and I want women to be empowered, but not at the cost of disempowering men, right?
Well, that's like whenever there's a movement on behalf of the disenfranchised and the disenfranchised find themselves franchised, it's very easy for that movement to turn into a revenge movement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is, the harsh truth about that is that the people who are haters, had they been under different circumstances, born a different race at a different time in a different place, they may have been the racists in the Jim Crow South, for example.
Yeah.
With the attitude that they have now from a completely different perspective in modern day, but they wouldn't want to hear that.
No.
The people who are supposedly demanding tolerance and demanding that this other side who are Nazis and fascists, stand down. They're being rather fascist in their own thinking, but they have a blind spot towards that. And I think it's because we find our respective echo chambers on social media, and enough people will say, yeah, you're right. They're terrible. That what we've done is we built these factions, and now it's become the new religion. We talked about God being kind of phased out of life. There's a new revival going on, literally, thank God. But a lot of people, found themselves with a spiritual hole that they're trying to fill up with this echo chamber of people who apparently agree with them. And then we're going to throw rocks at the other side as if they're all Satan and they're all evil, but they just think differently politically or even sociopolitically.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the other things, and there's so much here, right? It's like, gosh, there's so many things to talk about, so many aspects of this.
Well, with that in mind, talk about the silent part.
Yeah. So
and the revolution part.
All right. So a point in case. There's been this over generations since the beginning of the idea of marriage. It hasn't worked. The idea of monogamy is not natural. Now, that was brought up to me because I've always been a believer in monogamy, right? Having one person. And I still am, right? I mean, because I'm older and, I'm never going to change to say I'm going to have multiple partners. It doesn't interest me. Don't want it. But Tamaz would sit down and explain to me, look, how is monogamy working? It's actually the cause of most of our problems in society, because you're trying to ask both men and women to decide they're going to commit to one person for the rest of their life. And they're not just going to be attracted to one person for the rest of their life. And so they can very quickly feel like they're in a prison. Now, if they can make that choice on their own, that's a different thing. But when society imposes that on you, culture imposes that on you, or your network, your family, your friends, your church, it's a different feeling. And so when you find it in a relationship or a marriage, and this happens a lot, people take each other for granted. People don't do the things that were necessary to woo the person in the first place, going out together, having dates, having fun, having adventures. And it becomes monotonous when you just come from work, you watch a movie, you go to bed, and you don't have a life that you're really spending with each other where you're showing love and appreciation. People are going to want to get that. They have to get it somewhere, right? And that's why, you look at this Ashley Madison site, right? They've got 18 million subscribers who are signed onto a site that says, hey, it's okay to cheat. What does that tell you about society if a website like that has 18 million subscribers? Something is wrong, right? Something isn't working. And so, and I talk about that, it's at the time now, the silent revolution is to say, I gotta be the best person I can be in my marriage or relationship. I have to be open to finding out what my partner wants, but I can't ask him. What can I do better in a relationship? If they don't want to say you suck, right? You're really bad at a relationship. You don't do, because people don't have that freedom in our society, or feeling of that freedom, that I can say to you, well, if you did this to me, you did that to me, that my sexual satisfaction would be greater. I learned that, women have 23 ways to have an orgasm. I'm like, shit. Why didn't I know that? Why wasn't I educated about that? You know what I mean? Again, if I'd have known that when I was a teenager or growing up, my sexual life would have been very different. So let's
talk about this for a second. I think there's something we need to unpack here. And it's good because we've never talked about this on this show ever, but I've had conversations like this in private coaching sessions over and over again. First of all, teaching about sex in general and how to please each other and how to enjoy a sex life is taboo.
Yeah.
And I think this dovetails very nicely into our discussion about how feelings towards God and Christianity and faith have either evolved or devolved over about the last century here in the Western world. I've coached several people who are asexual. They're part of the ace community. At the very least, maybe they're demisexual, which is actually a wonderful, happy accident if you're born as such, because then you were only sexually turned on by people you are connecting with emotionally. And it's interesting because these people, I've been asked by an asexual customer, why men and women kiss? What's up with that? And you're probably saying, why would this person hire me? Well, they're hiring me because they're fascinated to learn because they're not feeling it, which is valid. Okay.
Sure.
But I've had people who are men who are demisexual and they're going out with women and the women are getting a little hot and bothered after 3 dates. It's like, aren't you sexually attracted to me? I'm into this. And they're like, well, no, wait, I really don't need the sex yet. And then the woman feels rejected, ironically,
Yeah.
based on how the stereotype would run.
Yeah.
The problem with living a Christian life, okay, no, I'm not going to single out Christianity, but it's my frame of reference and it's a solid frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
Is that problem with sex.
Yeah.
I think most of us aren't going to rip anybody off. We're trying to live a good life where, we don't necessarily need to go say the name of the Lord in vain. Although I think it's interesting how Jesus Christ has become a curse word, just kind of in defiance of God. You know what I mean? It's kind of a silly curse word if you think about it objectively. But, maybe we might covet my neighbor's new Beamer or something like that. But really, honestly, the problem that the big gap between most people and their God is sex.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like, look, you created me like this. You made me horny. You gave me this plumbing. You put these chicks in front of me that are just tantalizing. And I'm not supposed to do anything until I'm married. And then, you're prolonging my adolescence in the 20th century and sending me to grad school. Whereas as soon as I used to have hair on my balls back in the Stone Age, I would be coupled up with some chick in the community and away we'd go. Now I have an entire world, an entire internet full of women. They're all sexier and hotter than they ever have been in history. And that's fact. Okay. And I'm not supposed to do anything. And when I do, I'm supposed to pick one.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, I just don't believe that a God who loves me and would think he wants the best for me and isn't cruel would set me up with that conundrum for the rest of my life. As we've fallen away from being Christian, that made it okay to have sex. Because, okay, well, now that we've jettisoned this Judeo-Christian viewpoint of sex, then we can all just have free sex again. And if you really examine the psychology of people who are really mad at institutionalized religion or of God or something like that, yes, it's often the hypocrisy. You have ministers and priests diddling little boys and keeping all the money for themselves. The hypocrisy is one thing, but it's usually about, I want to have sex. Or if I get pregnant, I want to abort this baby without thinking about it. I want my way. So that was the sexual revolution. And now with the religion, the need for something higher, a higher power in our lives, something, we all want to have hope somewhere. We're putting it in this socio-political realm, which brings it back full circle of, okay, how do men and women feel about each other? How do masculinity and femininity fit together? If there's no intelligent design from God above, can't we just make this up? Can't we just hum a few bars? But it's not working. That's not working either, you see. So we didn't want the monogamy. We didn't want to, keep it in the holster until we were married and not have extramarital, premarital sex, not lust and all this. But now the pendulum swung the other way, and now we've got even more problems.
Yeah. So here's what I found for myself, and you can only ever speak for yourself, right? When there's a natural resistance for human beings to be told what to do, to have rules imposed on them, right? We're going to resist. It's in our nature, right? Because we're supposed to figure out what is right for ourselves, right? We come here programmed with everything we need. So what I found is this: when I'm in love with somebody, I don't want to be with anybody else. But if that relationship starts to fall apart and you're both taking each other for granted, then you don't feel loved. You don't feel like you're getting that love from your partner. You don't feel like you're getting that respect from your partner. You don't feel like you're understood from your partner. And you are going to go find that somewhere else. It's just nature, right? It's just nature. So, and that's why, when people used to come to me for counseling, and the infidelity was obviously a big issue. And I would say, look, here's the thing. If you don't want infidelity in your relationship, then you both have to take responsibility to make sure that doesn't come about. Because if she cheated on you, it's because she wasn't getting something from you that she needs. And so she went and found it somewhere else, or vice versa, right? So you really have to come together and communicate clearly what you want out of your marriage and your relationship, and make sure you're giving that. And if you can't, you got to let each other go, because you just
Well,
destroyed
hold
your
on a second. How does that reconcile with the fundamental improbability, if not impossibility, of monogamy? Why
Well,
does someone have to have done someone wrong for the monogamy not to work under those circumstances?
well, for monogamy, okay. So monogamy doesn't work when it takes the place of showing each other how much you care and love each other, because, well, it's just a rule. You can't cheat on me because God says it's wrong. And so that person doesn't have to try, doesn't have to do all these things anymore, because you're under the law. That law says you can't do that. So you're wrong if you do it, and you're not going to go to heaven.
But it's tantalizing to break the law.
Well,
Being naughty is just
right.
irresistible.
That's why I'm saying that law is imposed on you. Whereas if you love somebody and you don't want to do that, that law isn't applied onto you. It's just not something you don't want to do. It's like saying, well, listen, God says you can't jump on that fire. Now you want to jump on the fire, right? But if you just decide, I don't want to jump on the fire, I'm not going to jump on the fire, even if you told me to, I wouldn't jump on the fire, then you're not going to do it because you don't want to, right? That's the difference, the choice.
It's been said that the opposite of love is fear.
I don't believe love has an opposite.
Well, my point was going to be when we're not loving each other anymore, we're afraid of something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be fascinated to hear about love not having an opposite.
Yeah, because
however.
I think love contains everything.
Interesting. If a bit Pollyannish, I think a lot of guys are going to roll their eyes and go put substance on that.
Okay, so, love is not weak. Love is extremely powerful. And if you, so there are certain things that are just going to happen. If you jump off a building without a parachute, you are going to come to earth. There's something called gravity, right?
Yes.
If you cheat in life, you tell a lie, there's a part of your subconscious that knows that. And some people call it karma, what goes around, whatever it is, right? So there are all laws of nature, right? Laws of nature that we abide by, whether we want to or not, right? So we have to, one of the things that the book is about is letting go of shame and guilt, because they're just
huge,
right? They're societal constructs. They're not real, right? We just make it up, but we impose it on other people that you should be ashamed if you do this. You should feel guilty if you do that. But the reality is there's nothing really to be ashamed of or feel guilty about, as long as it's your authentic self. And so I realized that by having this experience, but rather than trying to be perfect in the eyes of everybody else, I had to accept my own flaws, my own frailties, and be okay with it, rather than worrying about, listen, I'm on stage talking about all this stuff, so I got to be perfect, because who's going to listen to me if I'm not perfect? Well, guess what? You're not perfect. And it's okay. And it's okay to talk about your frailties. It's all okay to talk about your shame and what you were ashamed of and why you're not anymore and what that means. And so I learned that she was my greatest teacher. And I've worked, like you said, with Tony Robbins. I worked with Dean too, and many others, right? But my greatest teacher was this woman, Tamaz, because she helped me see things much more clearly. And she helped me do that by living by example.
We've talked about the need to move away from shame and guilt. And I would agree with you that wallowing in shame and guilt is destructive. Sometimes that's our conscience speaking, but I don't think that would be something that becomes a habitual state of mind where we're constantly ashamed or feeling that we should be guilty about something.
Yeah.
Right. But a lot of people would say, well, that's conviction based on that same Judeo-Christian God that is showing you that you're sinning there. That's called sin. Mm-hmm. And so, if you repent from that, the shame and guilt will disappear. But I've noticed in my experience, it's not as easy as waving that magic wand. So a lot of people are out there making their own rules, being their own God of sorts, and saying, well, then what do I have to be ashamed of or guilty over anymore? Because, I threw out the big rule book and
Mhm.
now I'm, making it up as I go along. The problem is, what's going to win this battle? It's a revolution. When do we know we are emerging victorious from it?
Okay. Well, a revolution just means a circle going back to where you started from, right? So we're going back to our nature. And it's happening within us. It's happening with the consciousness. Humanity has a consciousness. So it's happening even without us driving it. The reason that we're driving it is because our consciousness is changing. And that's the silence. We don't hear that. We just start to react to it. So everything is energy, and the energy is constantly changing and evolving. But it's actually a revolution means just returning to the beginning. So we're just coming back to our nature, and it's happening with or without us. Now, there are people that will resist it. There are people who are afraid of it because it's change and they don't like change because people are like, hey, listen, I like the status quo the way it is. But there's only one constant in this entire universe, and that is change. And the speed of change is obviously getting faster and faster with the technologies we're having. And it's shaking everything up. Everything you believed in, everything you thought was right or wrong is being challenged for everybody, for me too, right? And that's what happened in this relationship. All the things that I thought I got it all down. I know this, I know that, I know what's going on. And I really didn't. I just
So
thought it.
connecting the dots here,
Yeah.
the revolution is bringing everything back around to love.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So practically speaking, how do we know we're on our way there, and how do we know when we're arriving?
We don't.
Okay. So the guys are
We
thinking,
just
what's
got to
the
have
takeaway
faith.
from this show?
But that's where you got to have faith. You got to have that faith and belief that everything is happening not to you, but for you. So
Well, that's a
all those,
platitude we've heard before.
it's not, hey, there's nothing new, right? It's just, you got to start to embrace it instead of feeling like, oh, this happened to me and I'm complaining and being a victim. That's not going to give you the learning and the growth that you need to embrace what happened. So I think we attract things into our lives, right? So instead of saying it's somebody else's fault, saying, well, how did I attract it into my life? What was I thinking? What was I saying? What was I doing to attract that experience, that person or that experience into my life? And where is the silver lining here? What can I learn from that so I don't do that again if that's what I don't want?
So what you're basically advocating is that, especially we as men, because we can do this, stop being our own harshest critic, stop being so hard on ourselves, take life as it comes, realizes that mistakes are to be learned from. Just don't go repeating the same mistakes over and over again like Groundhog Day. Learn from them, and then you will be revolving with this revolution in a way that will bring you more to a love state instead of, for example, a state where we devolve and just become bitter at women and angry at them all and saying it's all the women's fault instead of manning up and taking our own responsibility. Am I onto something?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. But, and one of the things that I wanted to come back to, which you said was so powerful, is we're our biggest critic. We're so hard on ourselves, but what most men don't realize is that means you are going to be hard on everyone around you.
Your
Because if
kids.
you're hard on yourself, you are going to if you're expecting so much of yourself that is impractical, impossible, you're going to be the same with everyone around you, right? So a lot has happened in all of our lives. We've all been through trauma, but we have to let it go. We have to not feel like someone did it to us, whether it's our father, our mother, our sister, our brother, or whether it's life or God. We have to let go of that idea and embrace what's happened to us and take the lessons from it and grow from it. Not easy.
I would add on top of that real quick, because I think it's important
Yeah.
that is symptomatic of us having a self-centered mindset, as if we are the center of our universe. We are our own God.
Right. Yeah.
It's very, very symptomatic of that.
Yeah.
Because then you stop considering what's going on in the outside world. So then everything you do is wholly your responsibility. I did this. Nobody helped me. I'm self-made. But when you royally screw up, you're really hard on yourself and you get really introspective. And this is, what people are generally talking about when they talk about being stuck inside your own head.
Yeah.
Whereas when we take ourselves less seriously, we're one person out of 8 billion here, and the universe is a lot bigger than Earth, then you can forgive yourself a lot more easily. You can have, dare I say, a better sense of humor about things.
Yeah.
And then when you start forgiving yourself, you indeed forgive other people more easily as well.
Yeah. Well,
Powerful.
yeah. No, absolutely. A lot of people believe that God can't forgive them. But but then they say, well, God loves me unconditionally. Well, how can he not forgive you then? Right?
It's a
It's a
tangled bird's
contradiction.
nest, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a contradiction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe that God is omnipowerful, omnipresent, with us all the time. Never is there a time that God isn't there. You don't need an intermediary to talk to God. You just have to talk to God. But if you don't recognize God is there and you don't talk to God, God is like, okay, you want to do this your way? That's fine. I'm here if and when you need me. But God is always there. Like you've seen the footsteps in the sand, right? That whole thing.
For
And I
sure.
believe
Yeah.
it.
The whole idea of human beings having their own agency is incredibly fascinating from
Yeah.
a theological perspective.
Yeah.
Like, why on earth would a God who created us want that or
Yeah,
allow that?
exactly.
But it is what it is.
And the other thing that came to my mind not long ago was human beings have invented the cell phone, right? So you can speak to each other wirelessly. Now, do you think humanity can create better technology than God? Right?
That kind of takes you back to the Stanley Kubrick 2001 Space Odyssey movie where they
Yeah.
figured everything out by the year 2001. This is in 1968, right? Except this black monolith that what the heck is it? And they're like
Yeah.
walking around going, I can't figure it out. And of course that's a metaphor for God,
Mm-hmm.
in that movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I think you did a great job bringing this back down to some practicality for guys. And what I want to do is I want to send them to your website, which they can visit by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/flytrap. Let's make it fun. FLYTRAP. And also, I am going to add your book, The Venus Flytrap, Sex, Lies, and Repercussions, onto the top of my Amazon influencer queue, which is my dedicated storefront. That's just a fancy, douchey name for it. And if you're listening to this or watching this within a few days of its release, that book will be right there at the top. And when guys go to mountaintop.podcast.com/flytrap, they're going to go to VFT, Venus Flytrap, 23.com. And what are they going to find at your website, Stephen?
Well, we're going to find more about the book, why I wrote the book, what the lessons were I learned from writing the book, and a bunch of other like blogs about it and what people think and how it can help people in their relationships, that kind of thing. So hopefully more ideas about what we've talked about, which I think was great. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Guys, go check it out. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com/flytrap or go to Amazon.com or go to Amazon.com by way of mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon to get a copy of Dr. Stephen Edwards' book. Steve, man, great conversation. It's been the kind of conversation a lot of these guys really like because it causes you to think and have to wrap your head around things. And, we were talking about just the size of media nowadays, and a lot of it is so fluffy and so manipulative. And it's great to have a down-to-earth conversation about this sort of thing. And I appreciate you very much. Hope you'll come back.
I would love to. I really appreciate you too, man. The work you do is making a huge difference, and I've enjoyed everything I've seen about you, and I'd love to come back. And when I finally get my podcast, you got to come on mine too.
Oh, for sure, man. I'd love to be guest number one.
I would love that.
I've done that before. Matter of fact, I was guest number one for a guy that goes really apologetically. It was called The Bad Girls Bible. And I think he's pod faded, but it became a huge show.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ranked up there in the sexuality category. And he came to me kind of, with his hat in his hand and said, man, I'm a big fan of your work. I'd like for you to be guest number one, but I don't have any listeners yet. And I don't know where this is going.
Right.
And I was like, man, you just said enough. I'm just thrilled that you would want me to be guest number one. And of course I did it knowing there was not going to be anybody listening. And next thing you know, I get all this, new people listening to my show because his show is blown up and he's done a great job. Yeah. So, I mean, you just never know. I'm always happy to do that. I appreciate it.
What last thought, just to let your viewers know, and I think they know about you anyway, man. We had all kinds of problems getting this going, right? Which was, you were so nice and said it was your fault. It was really my fault. But you were so patient. You were so kind. You've been so helpful to me, giving me ideas that can help me on my journey. So you're the real deal, man. And I appreciate it. And my commitment to you is once I get my podcast up and running, you will be my first guest if you're open to it.
Awesome, man. I'm really excited about that. And I don't throw the word awesome around much, but in all of that, thank you.
Well,
excellent. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Great conversation, great topic. I think the whole idea of a silent sexual revolution kind of implies that we as men have been silenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. We need to step up and
Absolutely.
instead of stepping off and
Yeah.
man up for our women and say the things like, what is it that you want to talk about? Or here's what I need from this relationship. Or are we in this relationship for all the right reasons? Heck, I got guys who are not even stepping up to ask a woman out because they're afraid of the repercussions from it, let alone what happens 5-10 years into the relationship. Good stuff.
Yeah. And one last thing, very often though in society, it's the very small percentage that control the larger percentage because they're the ones that are shouting and screaming. I believe that women want men to stand up and get back into their masculinity.
I couldn't agree more. They will tell us that whether we want to hear it or not.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Fantastic. I want to thank all our sponsors, Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine, Heroes Soap, and the Keyport. Guys, if you want to man up, visit our sponsors. And when you do, you can get to all three of them from the website at mountaintoppodcast.com, which, by the way, Better Men Get Better Women.com is also live now, points to the same place. When you get there, you can get anything you want from our three main sponsors and use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an additional 10% off. Guys, if you haven't gotten in on Vominos yet, the feedback I've gotten from guys who are in on it is it's like talking to me. It talks like me, it answers like me, and all of the answers you get from that AI interface in real time, even if it's in a bar or a club at 2 a.m., and you're not going to pick up the phone and call me, you get answers from a walled off, cordoned off partition of over 1,300 X and Y communications files. Okay. A masterclass, 2.5 hours counts as one file. So 20 years of information, all reliable information that will be actionable, delivered not in some fluffy Mr. Nice Guy. Oh, nice catch. I was wrong. Mr. ChatGPT, Mr. Nice Guy deal. No. This is completely different. Right there on your phone. The feedback that I'm getting from guys who are using Vominos so far is really like talking to me, and the answers are reliable. The feedback I get from you guys who are still on the fence is, I don't think it's going to be reliable. I think it's going to be, fluffy, or it's not. No, listen to the guys. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the guys who are already using it. I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe I shouldn't admit this, but I'm going to. I've been writing newsletters or planning podcasts, and I've head checked myself on Vominos before. Just say, what would I say to myself? What is something that I'm missing that I've said before that I could use here? I am using Vominos myself. I know that sounds possibly even creepy, but that's how much I believe in this program. Guys, I am skeptical of AI. The reason why there's a Vominos and the reason why I've only made it $14.95 a month for you guys so you can access it easily is because I don't trust us all going to ChatGPT, let alone Gemini, looking for advice on anything based on an unqualified internet out there feeding in its information. So check out Vominos if you haven't. It's at mountaintoppodcast.com/Vominos, VAMANOS. Virtual Ask Me Anything Networked Operating System is what the acronym is. And get you some. Give it a try. If you don't like it, I'll refund it and we're still friends. But give it a try at mountaintoppodcast.com/Vominos. As always, I'm all over social media at Scott McKay, SCOTMCKAY. Look forward to seeing you there. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.